Thank you for joining us for college or vocational planning and preparation for students with disabilities webinar. Today, we are joined by Jeanette Rees. She is a highly experienced family support specialist for Alexandria City Public Schools since 2013. Her work focuses on helping families navigate their child's special education services, IEPs, and 504 plans, and addressing the challenges of raising a child with a disability. Also, she is the parent of three adult children with disabilities. In January 2024, Ms. Rees received the ACPS Vision, Integrity, and Passion VIP Award for her work supporting families of students with disabilities for whom English is not their primary language. Prior to her tenure with Alexandria City Public Schools, she chaired the Alexandria Special Education Advisory Committee. We are also joined this morning with Shira Brothers, manager of the Career and Transition Special Education Office with Fairfax County Public Schools. And now we will start. Thank you both for being with us today. And please, Jeanette, take it away.
All right. Thanks so much, Amal. And good morning, everyone. I am delighted to be here. And as Amal said, we are going to be talking today about college or vocational planning and preparation for students with disabilities. And I just want to make something very clear from the start. This presentation today is geared towards families of students with disabilities who are being educated in the general education setting. These are the students who are on track for getting a standard diploma or the advanced diploma. We are not today talking about opportunities for students with developmental disabilities, the students who will be getting the applied studies or special education diploma. So that's a whole separate presentation. But today we're focusing on kids with IEPs in the general education setting. And today I'm hoping to answer questions such as what post-secondary options are there for students with disabilities? What skills do these students need to strengthen before they go off to college or to vocational school? How, as a family, can you identify colleges that will provide good supports for students with disabilities? And very importantly, how can a student receive accommodations from the Office of Disability Services at a college or from a vocational school? So, in talking with a lot of high school students with IEPs or 504 plans, what has come through to me is that many of them feel a lot of pressure to go on to college immediately after 12th grade. And while it is absolutely appropriate for a high school to be encouraging kids to pursue higher education, education of some sort after high school, it's also very important for kids with disabilities to be given permission to move at their timetable. So we really need to be giving our kids permission to feel like they can take the necessary time that they need. Maybe that's going to involve taking a gap year or not going to college or vocational school in the traditional manner of going off to and living at a four-year school immediately. So we really do need to be considering whether college is going to be the most appropriate option for the student, or should we be considering vocational options? And very, very importantly, what does the student want to do? Is that a realistic goal? And does he or she have a roadmap for making that happen? This is a time also when parents need to set aside their own expectations. So if you come from a family where Four generations have gone to the same college, and you've always been hoping that your child is going to follow in your footsteps. Not be the best approach here because we have to figure out what the most appropriate option is going to be for our student. So this is a time for being very realistic and not for wishful thinking. This is a time when the student and family need to have a realistic understanding of the options available based on the student's academic performance, GPA, maturity level, and independence level. Now, it is important to know that some schools offer extra supports. So, for example, George Mason University offers the Massey program, which is designed to support um, individuals with low support needs autism. They also have the EF program designed to support students who may need to strengthen their executive functioning skills. Okay, I do want to also make sure that we understand that today we are not talking about programs such as the Mason Life program or the Longwood Life program or the College Living Experience. Those are programs that are designed in large part for people with developmental disabilities, students who may be getting that applied studies diploma. That's not the population we're discussing today. So another thing that we really need to be considering would be whether your student would benefit from a gap year or would benefit from start college but taking a reduced course load initially, um, or whether the student would do well to go off to community college. Now, before we start talking about community college, I do want to address a question that was submitted ahead of time. A parent was asking whether a student's college options would be limited if the student did not take a foreign language in high school. So I think it's important to remember that for students, many students with disabilities do really struggle with foreign languages or world languages, I guess is the official term we use in school systems. Um, so if the student does not take a foreign language, that student may not be able to get the standard diploma at graduation, but it certainly should not interfere with the student's ability to come away with a standard diploma. Whether or not it will limit options as far as college is concerned, some colleges want to see 2 years each of two different languages or 3 years of one language. So this could be a time where you could explain why your student cannot learn a foreign language. You could do that there's an area in the Common App on the college application. Um, but I also want to point out that if your student ends up going to community college, you don't have to worry about this foreign language requirement at all. So I do want to spend some time discussing community college because for many, many students with disabilities, this is a great choice. It allows them to get used to taking college level classes without having to get used to living away from home or to the social demands of college. It really provides them with extra time to grow up. Also, very importantly, community colleges allow students to take a reduced course load. So perhaps your student just beginning community college could start out taking one or two classes and maybe also working at a part-time job, and then build up the number of colleges that he or she is taking as his or her stamina for college courses increases. Now, one of the beauties of community colleges, and I think this is pretty much throughout the United States, but it certainly is true here in Virginia. If the student goes through community college, has maintained the required GPA, and has taken the required prerequisite courses, that student will easily be able to transfer on to any of the public colleges or universities in Virginia, and also often to a private school or a school that's located outside of Virginia. Um, it's a guaranteed thing. They have agreements among the colleges and universities to make sure that that can happen. Also, importantly, community colleges offer accredited trade options. So, in the work that I do, and I'm sure that the people who work here in your resource center will agree that we frequently hear from families of students with disabilities about how smart their child is. Oftentimes, parents come in and talk to us about their twice exceptional students. I am not dismissing their intelligence at all. However, I do think that we also have to pay attention to that many individuals who are neurodivergent, who have autism or ADHD or a combination of autism and ADHD and or learning disabilities also often commonly struggle with some other challenges that do need to be addressed, because ultimately it's not going to matter how smart that student is if we have not addressed some of these challenges that can really interfere with their success. And I'm talking about things such as weak executive functioning skills, such as organization, time management, follow through on a task, ability to get started with a task, being able to assess the quality of the work product that they are producing. These individuals also frequently struggle with being very inflexible to the point of rigidity, which means that they often feel that there's only one way of doing things. They can easily get stuck. It's very difficult for them to collaborate or cooperate with others. And unfortunately, oftentimes, their inflexibility causes them to be the object of bullying. In addition, many times these individuals struggle with emotional regulation. They still may be having emotional outbursts and meltdowns in middle school and high school, and that can certainly dramatically affect their social interactions with their peers. These individuals also often struggle with very high levels of anxiety. They may have sensory issues that interfere. Many times they have a very difficult time paying attention or sustaining their focus. And they may have poor working memory, which also contributes to attentional challenges. They may have social challenges and really not have very many friends. In addition to that, they may be immature compared to their same age peers. Now, this is something I think families really need to pay attention to. There was a huge study that was done at NIH, and the results of the study were published back in November of 2007. In that study, the brains of hundreds of individuals, teens and young adults who were neurodiverse as well as neurotypical, their brains were imaged, and the results showed that the individuals who were neurodiverse had a brain development that was 3 to 5 years behind that of their typical peers. Their brains would ultimately catch up, but um, it's really important to bear in mind that even though you might have a student who is 18 chronologically, that student who is neurodiverse may have the maturity level of a 13 or a 15-year-old, and consequently, probably is going to lack the maturity to go off to college at age 18 or the year immediately after 12th grade. This was a seminal study. There have been subsequent studies done on the same issues and which have corroborated the results at least 2 or 3 times, if not more. Another huge challenge for these individuals is habitual procrastination, which probably starts out as anxiety and fear that they're not going to do the task correctly, but quickly becomes a habit. Even for stupid little things, you might say, "Honey, would you please bring the laundry basket upstairs for me?" "Sure, Mom, fine, I'll do that." And half an hour later, it hasn't been done. Or, "I need you to take the trash out." "Okay, Mom, I'm on it. I'll do it." And you have to nag and nag and nag before it actually gets completed. Well, it can be annoying when our kids procrastinate when they are school age, but think of the consequences for them as they get older. If they procrastinate, they're going to be late turning in school assignments, or the quality of the assignment might be very poor. As they go into the working world, they may miss deadlines at work because of procrastination, which could endanger their employment. They may end up having to pay a lot of late fees and penalties for bills or taxes because they procrastinate with paying those or filing their taxes. And there also can be significant consequences with regard to their relationships. Another challenge for these individuals is that they often have a hard time being realistic. They can sometimes live in a fantasy world. They also often have a very poor sense of the value of money. Um, they have trouble grasping what needs to be done in order to achieve a goal, have a hard time creating a roadmap for themselves. Um, they may be very unwilling to ask for help. They may feel some sense of shame that they even need to ask for help, and yet we really want to impress upon them that they do need to ask for help. And they may have poor self-esteem and lack confidence in their own abilities. Now, I want to briefly share with you a situation with a young whose parents came to speak with me about a year ago. This young man, I've changed his name, we'll call him Liam in this particular scenario. He's 16 years old. He has low support needs autism, and he has no difficulty at all understanding the content of his classes at school. Um, he is someone whose parents have set the expectations starting when he was very, very little that they do expect him to go off to college. He's kind of indifferent to the whole idea, but he does assume that he will go. Liam has a B average in his, and he takes classes in the general education setting, but he's often late turning in assignments, especially if it's for one of his non-preferred classes. Liam's parents are very involved with his schoolwork, and every day they remind him that it's time to sit down and start doing his homework. Every day they check his assignments online, and they're involved in big school projects such as science fair projects. Outside of school, Liam takes guitar lessons, and He loves a particular rock band. And if you ask him what his goal is for his life, he will tell you that he wants to be the lead guitarist in his favorite band. He acknowledges that it would be okay if he had to be the backup guitarist initially, but ultimately he's planning to be the lead guitarist. Um, so um, he expresses contempt. If anyone suggests to him that maybe he should start learning about different styles of music, or suggest to him that the really great rock guitarists actually have a classical foundation, he really poo-poos that idea. He's not interested in that at all. And he really dislikes practicing. So his parents have to constantly be reminding him that they're paying for his guitar lessons and that he needs to practice. So he'll very begrudgingly practice for about 10 minutes at a time and then stop. His family rarely goes on vacation because he does not like sleeping anywhere but in his own bed. Um, his mother is very involved in managing his personal hygiene. She always reminds him every day to brush his teeth, to take a shower, to use deodorant, to shave, to wash his hair. And in fact, his mother runs the shower for him every day to make sure that the temperature is where he's going to want it. Liam takes medication daily, as do many individuals with developmental or with um, who are neurodivergent. Um, but he can't be relied upon to consistently take his medication or to even swallow it. So his parents set out the medication for him, and they actually have to watch him swallow it to make sure he does take it. Now, the school bus stop is across the street from his house, but he absolutely refuses to take the school bus. He won't take a bus anywhere. He won't take metro anywhere. He really expects and relies upon his parents to drive him any place he has to go. And so far, he's not expressed any interest in learning how to drive. And his parents pay for everything, so he rarely needs or uses money for anything. As I've been talking, I'm wondering if you've been thinking that there might be some challenges that Liam will have when he goes off to college. If you want to, go ahead and make a comment about that in the Q&A, and we'll look at that a little bit later. So, as we're talking about preparing our kids for going off to college or vocational schools, I think it's important to remember that there really is a broad range of skills that we need to be strengthening. So, in my opinion, we need to be helping them strengthen their personal life skills, including flexibility and emotional regulation. We need to be strengthening their academic skills, their executive functioning skills, and their self-advocacy skills. So, building these skills takes a long time. So, I would encourage you, if your child is still in middle school, to start working on those skills then and there in middle school. But if your child is already in high school, really, really start working on them. Um, and among these skills, we want them, well, first of all, we want to have them avoid learned helplessness. We really want to help them become as independent as possible. One of the skills they need to start doing is to wake up independently. You're not going to be at college with them. And if your child can't get up for his 9 o'clock class, he's going to fail that class and you're going to be wasting your money on tuition. So let's start the process of getting them to wake up independently maybe one day a week. Let's start with, say, Wake Up Wednesdays. And then you can expand it to more days throughout the week until your student really is able to get up independently. I encourage you to provide your student with an old-fashioned alarm clock. We do not want them setting an alarm on their phone to wake themselves up. The reason I say that is that we know they should not have their phone in the bedroom with them because it's very disruptive to their sleep. If your child is consistently having a hard time either sleeping through the alarm or just not getting up, you might want to consider a really obnoxious alarm clock. Now, there's one that I've seen advertised in Attitude Magazine. I've also seen it advertised on Amazon. It's called Clocky. And it makes a really, really loud, very obnoxious sound when it goes off in the morning. But on top of that, when the alarm goes off, it starts rolling forward because it has big wheels on it. And it will roll off of the bedside table and across the floor so that the person has to actually get up and out of bed in order to turn it off. That may or may not be something that you want. And I'm not trying to, advertise it. I just want you to be aware that it is a tool in case you want to use it. Now, before going off to school, our students need to be financially savvy. They need to have a bank account established for them while they're in high school with a debit card associated with it. And they really need to understand that there's only a certain amount of money in the account and that when that money is gone, it's gone. So it's not going to be a good idea for them to buy pizza for the entire dorm. And I can't tell you how often I've heard of that scenario. So the student really needs to be able to balance the account, needs to know how to write checks if that's something you want them to do, or to use Zelle or Venmo or Cash Apps, so that they can really understand how money works. In addition, we need to help them understand the true cost of spending money on things like DoorDash or Grubhub. You know, talk to them about the fact that if they use Grubhub for a burger and fries because they've complained that, oh, there's nothing good to eat in the house, Mom, um, that they're going to actually have to work probably a couple of hours at their job, their part-time job at Baskin Robbins to pay for that burger and fries. I mean, they need to see that, you know, a 17 or $20 burger and fries from Grubhub is really much more than they need to be paying. That's my opinion. In any case, we want our student to be able to use public transportation, understand about Lyft and Uber and cabs, also understand that the bus is going to be a whole lot cheaper for them to take than a Lyft or Uber or cab. Now, in Alexandria, we have a city bus that's free. I don't know if you have something similar to that in Fairfax. If you do, that's a great way to get your child to practice using the bus. And if you're worried about keeping track of them, put a tracker on their phone. Our kids need to be able to prepare their own meals or cook certain simple things. They don't have to be gourmet cooks, but they need to be able to feed themselves. They need to be able to change the sheets on their bed. They need to be able to keep their living space clean, especially if they are going to have a roommate. They need to know how to run a vacuum, and do their own laundry. Now, this is a really important life skill. And what we don't want is for the student to be like the stereotypical sitcom college student who comes home and brings a semester's worth of laundry for mom or dad to do. It's very important also that the student be able to manage his or her own hygiene. If you're still constantly having to remind them to brush their teeth or wash their hair or use deodorant, you really need to be working on this skill. Many, many students with disabilities take medication. So we need to make sure that the student understands the purpose of the medication. The student needs to be able to take that medication independently. And very, very importantly, the student needs to keep track of the medication so they don't run out of it before it has been refilled. And very importantly, especially if they are living away on campus, they need to understand that there can be a black market on a lot of college campuses for stimulant medications. So they need to have a lockbox and keep their stimulant medications locked up. Now, it's also very important before your child is going to go off to college that he or she has actually spent some time away from home. There are a lot of really wonderful summer camps, overnight camps that might be a great place for your middle or high school student to spend some time at, even if it's just a week. Or perhaps your student will have done some overnights with a youth group or through something like Scouts. If your student is one who has stimming behaviors, we need to have some conversations with them about where it's okay for them to stim. We're not asking them to give up something that could be soothing to them, but to pick and choose where they do it. For example, it's perfectly appropriate for them to turn their hands into their bird puppets. If they want to, or to twirl ribbons around, um, as long as that's being done in their room and not out in the classroom or out in the hallway or common area. Um, we also want to make sure that the student can take turns in conversation. That is a skill you might want to have a goal added to their IEP with regard to that, if that's an area of challenge. And very, very, very importantly, the student needs to be polite and use good manners. Say please and thank you. The reality is that for these individuals, there will be times in their life when they are going to be dependent upon the kindness of others. And people are far more willing to help someone who is pleasant and polite than someone who is surly and rude. So, another hugely important skill to be working on is flexibility. We could spend an entire webinar just on strategies to improve flexibility. We're not going to do that today, but I do want to stress how important it is to be working on this skill. Flexibility is essential for problem solving, for adapting to change, for adjusting to something that comes up that's unexpected. Unfortunately, it is something that we need to explicitly teach individuals who are neurodiverse. It will not be something that they naturally learn, unlike typical peers. Flexibility is necessary for good outcomes as adults in academic and work settings, in independent living, in building relationships and maintaining relationships. Now, the reality is that we can spend a lot of time on helping our student become more flexible, and I encourage you to do that. But chances are good that your student is never going to be entirely loosey-goosey. What we're working towards is for them to become less rigid. So I encourage you to explore tools for building flexibility, such as the Unstuck and On Target curriculum. This is a research research-based curriculum that was developed at the Ivy Mount School in Rockville, Maryland. And it was developed for individuals with autism, although the premises of it, I think, can be very helpful for anyone. And one of the basic ideas that it conveys is the sense that the more flexible we can be, the more choices and options we're going to have. Also, um, there's the idea if somebody has an idea of how they want to do something and it doesn't work, if they can't be flexible and try another way, they're not going to get any of what they want. They will have no success. But if they can be flexible and figure out a different way to approach the issue, then they'll probably get a lot of what they wanted, um, or at least most of what they wanted. And isn't it better to get some of what you want than none of what you want? So if their plan doesn't work, but they can be flexible, they can find another way to reach their goal. We want to be talking a lot with our students also to help them understand that there's more than one way of doing things. And you can talk about this a lot in your own life. For example, you may talk about Thanksgiving's coming up, and look, MapQuest shows us 3 different routes that we can take if we're going to go visit grandma. I like to go one route, and that's okay to have a favorite way, but it's important to know that there's more than one way of getting there. Or you might talk about making a cake and having them help you and say, okay, do you want to use the wooden spoon? Do you want to use the hand mixer? Both ways work. It's okay to have a preference, but both ways work. Show them examples of being flexible in your own life. And that can be little things like, oh, well, I was planning to have cherry yogurt this morning for breakfast, but turns out somebody ate it. So I had to be flexible and have peanut butter toast instead. And that was okay. Or I'm planning our vacation for next summer. I know it's October, but you know how we have to make these reservations early. Turns out that the house we really liked at the beach is not available the week we want to go. I wonder if we can be flexible and go the following week when the house is available, or if we can be flexible and go to a different house the week we originally planned to go. Anyway, I encourage you to talk about flexibility a lot and really work on this skill. Another skill that really requires uh, paying attention to is working on emotional regulation. So, uh, we want to be encouraging self-awareness around emotions. You may want to use a feelings thermometer as a visual tool to help with this. Now, I right now my feelings thermometer is covered up, so I don't know if you can see it on your screen. However, if you were to Google images, autism, feelings thermometer, you will have a whole bunch of feelings thermometers pop up on your screen. And the reason these can be so helpful is that it's a visual reminder, and we want the kids to be staying in a cool color zone, like a blue or a green zone. And if they're starting to get worked up and moving into a yellow zone, then we want to encourage them to use their calm down strategies. We never want them to get up into the red zone. So, um, as I say, we can talk to them a lot about this. And you can start out by saying to your child, well, good morning, honey. How are you feeling today? I'm fine. Well, it doesn't really sound to me like you're fine. You don't sound like you're in a blue or a green zone. Um, I'm wondering if you're kind of in the yellow zone right now. Maybe we should be using some of our calm down strategies. Now, calm down strategies are things that you will have to work out individually with your child. But in general, deep breathing has been a technique that is pretty well recognized as something that can be helpful for our kids in helping them calm down. Maybe rubbing their legs, maybe them squeezing an object, maybe getting a drink of water, or just walking away from the situation for a few minutes might be helpful ways for them to calm down. But again, we really want to be encouraging how they're feeling before those emotions escalate to the point where they have an outburst. We also want to be encouraging them to become as resilient as possible. These are kids who give up really, really easily. If something didn't work the first time, they are reluctant to try to do it again. Come on, honey, let's try that again. Oh, no, mom, it didn't work. It's not going to work. Well, come on, let's just try it. And maybe it will work the second time, or maybe if they can be flexible, we can figure out a different approach to solving the problem. But the message we want to be conveying to them is that we want them to be willing to not give up. We want them to be willing to be persistent, even if something didn't work the first time or if something unexpected happened. I know of a young man who was planning to go to a job fair um, while he was in college, and he walked into the room, and it was noisy, and he had sensory issues. And instead of just persisting and going ahead with it, he turned around and he walked out the door because he wasn't expecting it to be noisy like that. So we want to help prepare our kids to persist with things that they need to be doing. Another area that we have got to be encouraging them around is to give them the tools to manage dating and risky behaviors on campus. Make sure your student understands basic rules around dating. Talk to them about common signals around dating and help them understand that they may not stalk anybody. Now, our kids may have a disability, but they are like their typical peers in that they want a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Uh, be sure you spend time with them, helping them understand that they could be very susceptible to online dating schemes. And make sure they understand that they do not have to engage in behavior that they don't really want to just because they want to fit in. So make sure they have the skills to withstand the pressures of dating and drinking and drugs, and that they understand how to say no. Spend some time with them, maybe do some role playing with them. That could be very, very helpful for them. Now, let's take a look now at the building their academic skills. The reality is that if they've always had accommodations, they're probably going to need to have some accommodations in college. But I encourage you to take a look at what they currently have and really assess whether any of them can be faded back and which ones are essential to keep. And the one that I'm really concerned about in terms of fading back is a very common one a lot of our kids have, which is that in school they are allowed to take a break if they need it. Okay, that's fine. But if they take a break in the middle of their college lecture, they're going to be missing out on the content of the lecture. And so we really want to be working in high school to try to build their stamina so that maybe they don't need to take that break. Again, if it's something they need, that's fine. But if it can be faded back, that could be useful for them. Also, I encourage you to talk to them about identifying whatever assistive technology tools might be helpful for them. Even if they rejected the idea of them in high school, some of these tools might be essential for them when they get to college. They may really benefit from things like voice to text software or pens that can record the entire lecture, especially if they have poor fine motor skills and can't take notes very rapidly. Um, another Grammarly is another one that could be great for them. That's a free thing that they could put on their laptop. And if they struggle with spelling or grammar, it's a really helpful tool. Also, we want to be boosting their writing skills. We know that writing can be very, very difficult for a lot of neurodiverse individuals because there's so many things they have to keep in their head at the same time, like the facts about the thing they're writing about and the structure of how they're going to put together and organize their essay and. So, I encourage you to have them start regularly going to the writing center at the high school if your high school has one. Have them do that throughout high school so that it's a habit and they'll continue to do that once they get off to college. Um, Also, we need to have them become more independent in terms of managing their academics. If there's a long-term project, like a big science fair project, can they manage that? Can they break it down into the chunks that they need to? Can they meet the individual deadlines? Or are you still managing all of that for them? Are they in the habit of checking their assignments online? Um, that's an important thing for them to do because when they're in college, that's how they're going to hear about their assignments. And that's how they're going to submit a lot of their assignments. Also, what about day-to-day homework? Is your student able to come home, maybe get a snack, and then independently sit down and start working on his homework? Or are you constantly having to say, it's time to put away the game now and come and sit down and get started with your homework? Is your student able to prioritize his work? Does he understand that if there's a book report due this Thursday and a three-paragraph essay due next Tuesday, the priority is to get the book report done first? Also, very, very importantly, is your student able to accurately assess and estimate how long a task is going to take? This is an incredibly important life skill, and we do it all the time, every day. I mean, for example, I like to exercise in the morning, so I set my alarm for very early so that I can get up and get my exercise done and then get myself ready for my work day. Or other things like Thanksgiving's coming up. Maybe you have to go to the airport to pick up guests who are coming to stay with you. So you need to be able to estimate how long is the drive going to take so that I know when I need to leave the house. Again, this is a really important life skill for them to learn. I encourage you also to look carefully at the cause of any academic struggles they're having. Is it that they are having a hard time understanding the content of the class? In which case maybe a tutor would be helpful. I know in our school system, teachers are required to remain after school at least one afternoon a week to work with students. So they might be able to get some help that way. Another option might be a private tutor, although that could be very expensive. Or is your student struggling with executive functioning deficits? Or is it a problem with both? So we really do need to be working on strengthening their executive functioning skills. And when people think of the term executive functioning, sometimes they just think about organization. But Um, Individuals also have to strengthen their skills around flexible thinking, working memory, um, getting started with a task, following through on that task till to completion, managing their impulses, being flexible, etc. We also need to be addressing this issue of the habitual procrastination and how that interferes with their ability to initiate tasks. So, something to consider would be whether a coach would be helpful. Now, private coaches can be very expensive. Before you go ahead and decide on a coach, I encourage you to go to the CHAD website and read the article that they have all about ADHD coaching. It's a very useful article, and it will help you think about things you should bear in mind when you're looking for a coach for your child. You know, the fact is, anyone can hold themselves out as a life coach, but you want somebody who's certified and has a whole toolbox full of strategies to be helpful for your student. But before you go ahead and hire a coach, you need to determine whether your student is going to be willing to use one, because if not, you're going to be wasting your time and your money. Be aware also that there are some summer programs at various colleges throughout the country, which are geared to supporting high school students in developing stronger executive function skills. Probably the best known one is at Landmark College in Putney, Vermont. I know there's one at Mercyhurst University. I've heard of others throughout the country as well. Um, Now, these programs may have a hefty price tag to them. However, I have heard from several parents whose kids have gone to the Landmark program that they were able to get very, very generous financial aid packages so that it really became affordable to them. Another area that we have to strengthen, help our kids strengthen, is their self-advocacy skills. Now, right now, you are your child's best advocate. And so you've been modeling these skills for your child. However, you are not going to be going off to college with your student. You're not going off to the workplace with your student. Your student needs to be able both to be self-aware and identify what she's going to need to be successful, and also to be able to gain the skills to speak up and ask for those things. So, a good way to get started with this process is to include your student in his IEP or 504 meeting and other informal meetings. And that should be happening starting in mid to late elementary school, definitely middle and high school. Um, it's going to be important for the student to be familiar with his or her accommodations and really to be able to identify which ones they use and whether others would be useful and helpful for them. Now, I know that a lot of times as parents, we might think a particular accommodation might be useful. And our kid looks at us like we have two heads, and it's like, "Ugh, Mom, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to look like such a dork if I do that." So we can think that they're great accommodations, but we also have to make sure that they have the ones that they're going to be willing to use. We should encourage your student to start practicing to asking what he's going to need. And very importantly, the student needs to be willing to ask for help when that's needed. I know I mentioned that before, but it's a very, very important point. Um, so uh, I want to share with you that there was a situation I recently learned of where a student was not receiving her accommodations in her high school math class. And when her parents called an IEP meeting to address that, The student was blamed for not speaking up and asking for her own accommodations. Now, that was completely inappropriate. It did not excuse the fact that the teacher was causing the IEP to be out of compliance, and the teacher was not providing the required accommodations. But it does point out the fact that a lot of times this skill takes a long, long time to develop. In this particular case, this was a 15-year-old girl who was intimidated and was uncomfortable asking her teacher for the accommodations. So again, we need to work on that skill a lot so that they can become more comfortable. Now, how do we identify colleges with good supports for students with disabilities? First of all, any college that accepts federal funds is required to have an Office of Disability Services on campus. However, they are not all equal. Some are much better than others at providing supports. So I would encourage you to find out from the college that your student might be interested in, where exactly is their Office of Disability Services located? Is it there with all the other student services? Or is it in a building that's located on the edge of campus behind the facilities plant that's hard to get to and the student is going to be uncomfortable going to? Also, you can contact the school and find out what types of supports do they offer for students with disabilities? Do they offer tutoring and or coaching? And are these peer-based, faculty-based, or provided by an outside contractor? Do you have to pay an additional fee for your student to access these supports? Now, there are a lot of colleges that do offer additional programs, and often it's at an additional fee to provide enhanced levels of support. So, Mercyhurst does this, Landmark College does this, Nova Community College has the College Steps program, and George Mason University has the Massey program and the EF programs that I mentioned earlier. However, I do want to make you aware that those programs have limited openings. So if your student waits too long to apply for those programs, there may not be room, and they may have to be waiting listed for that program. So just bear that in mind. And also, you need to assess if you're sending your student off to one of these colleges and expecting that your student is going to be using the supports, is your student actually going to do that? If your student is not willing to take advantage of the supports that he or she clearly needs, maybe your student is not ready to go off to college. Maybe your student lacks the maturity to be there at this point in time. So we do need to be planning ahead. Please don't wait until your child's senior year to start working on these skills. I encourage you to identify appropriate schools that your student might be interested in a few years ahead of time so that you can plan a visit, so your student can see how comfortable he or she feels on campus, and see if your student pictures himself or herself being there. And also for you to check on things like where that Office of Disability Services is located. Work with the school counselor to see whether your student really needs to take standardized tests such as the SAT. Not every college requires those. But if your student is going to be taking them, can you apply for necessary accommodations ahead of time? And talk to the counselor about things like building your college resume, balancing out strengthening the academic skills with volunteer and extracurricular activities, and find out about scholarships as well. Now, there was a question that came up before the webinar, where the family wanted to know um, if the family should address challenges on the Common App. And again, I think we need to look at this on a case by case basis. The question was if they should be explaining why there were poor test scores or poor grades because of the disability. What I would suggest to you is to really think carefully. Now, if the student was getting poor grades or doing poorly early in high school, but has gained the skills and has really turned those grades around, I think it's perfectly appropriate to put something in the Common App about how, your student has worked hard to gain these skills. But if the challenges are still in existence, then um, and you're really worried about your student's ability to go off to college and do well in college because the student still is struggling in a lot of areas, I think at that point, maybe your student needs to delay going to school and continue to work on some of those skills. Because again, we don't want to just be changing the setting in which your student is struggling. So, how does a student get accommodations in college? Well, again, if the student had accommodations in high school, chances are good he or she is going to need them in college. So, in order to receive them in college, it's important to understand that the student is going to have to meet with the disability counselor in the Office of Disability Services before the start of the first semester to develop a memorandum of accommodations. Your student has had an IEP or a 504 in high school. That's fine, but the IEP does not follow the student to college. Um, I, um, IEPs are under the federal law IDEA, which ends when the student exits high school. In college, accommodations are granted through the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, which is also a federal law. So, um, the student is going to have to meet with a disability counselor. Parents need to be aware that they probably are not going to be able to meet with the counselor also. Maybe for the very, very first meeting, you'll be able to talk with a disability counselor, but after that, they won't talk with you. They will only talk with the student. That means that your student needs to think ahead of time about what accommodations would be helpful to have and make a list to bring into the meeting. So, in order to receive a memorandum of accommodations for college, the student needs to demonstrate that he or she actually needs them in order to access the education. And being able to show that there is a history of accommodations is very, very useful. So, when your student has that initial meeting with a disability counselor, your student is going to have to bring some documentation. Typically, the student will bring a copy of the IEP, the last IEP from high school, bring a, or a 504 plan, something that shows the accommodations that they received in high school. If they indeed did have accommodations for the College Board, bring the letters that show those accommodations. You may need to bring some medical documentation that shows a diagnosis. That's something that you'll have to determine on a case-by-case basis, depending on the college. Also, find out whether the college is going to require private neuropsych testing. Some colleges do, some colleges do not. There's been a lot of protest about requiring this because private neuropsych testing is very, very expensive. It can cost $5,000 to $7,000. And so make sure you find out ahead of time. And I would encourage you to make that phone call no later than your child's junior year in high school, because if it's something that's going to have to happen, you need to make sure that there's time to get it done, to get the appointment with the psychologist to have it done. And If they say, yes, we do require it, I encourage you to say, well, it's very expensive. Do you have any resources there on campus that my student could access that perhaps could mean that testing could be done and have it be much more affordable? Again, that's something to look at on a case-by-case basis. But if the testing is required, the testing may be no more than 3 years old, and your student needs to be tested as an adult. So the student and the disability counselor will develop the memorandum of accommodations together. The student's going to have to present this to each and every one of his professors at the beginning of each and every semester. If the student forgets and waits until late in the semester and then says, oh, I'm supposed to get accommodations, the professor is under no obligation to grant them. And if your student starts out at one school and then transfers to another, such as starting out at Nova and then transfers maybe to George Mason or Old Dominion or to another school, that memorandum of accommodations will follow the student to the new school, which is great news. The student will still need to meet with the Office of Disability Services at the new school, um, but um, it will be a very simple process to have those accommodations transferred. Bear in mind that the memorandum of accommodations may be called something else, depending on what college your student is at, but they will know if you ask for a memorandum of accommodations. Now, very briefly, as far as vocational options are concerned, and how students can get accommodations, if they take a vocational option through the community college, the procedure for getting the accommodations is the same as what we've just discussed. Um, there are a lot of approved apprenticeship programs in Virginia or straight vocational schools. So they are required under ADA to provide accommodations to students with disabilities, but the student will need to ask about them when applying. And they will need to have a standard diploma or a GED in order to apply to a vocational school or an internship program. So I want to briefly mention that through DARS, which is the Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services, it is possible to get some employment supports for individuals with disabilities. A student must be at least aged 14 to access the services, but they may access them as of age 14. Any student who has an IEP or 504 is welcome to apply. And some students can have access to vocational training through DARS at the Woodrow Wilson Center in Fishersville, Virginia. And I encourage you to have them discuss with their case manager how to go about applying for that program. And at that program, they may have options of having assessments done about their interests and vocational skill areas. So, but those assessments will be fairly narrow in scope. So, one last area that I did want to address is that anytime your student is planning to go off to work, even while your student is still in high school or college or preparing for work afterwards, your student needs to understand that as long as they're taking home a paycheck, they need to do the work they are requested to do. They are at work to work. Employers expect them to be on time, to have good attendance, to do their jobs, to be polite, very, very importantly, to put their phones away, and to leave the drama at home. So sadly, an employer really isn't going to care if your daughter just broke up with her boyfriend. She's going to need to put on her professional face and go to work anyway. Now, there were a couple of other questions that I received before the webinar. I just want to quickly address those. One was about if a student needed to get physical accommodations or accommodations because of a physical disability. So again, the student will need to talk with the Office of Disability Services and perhaps will also need to talk with certain other facilities on campus, such as housing. For example, if the student is going to need a room that's on the ground floor, or maybe needs to have a keypad put on the door if they have difficulty using a key, that sort of thing. Um, another question had to do with whether there were any public art schools for students with disabilities who might be interested in graphic design. Again, any public or any college or institution of higher learning that accepts federal funds is going to be required to provide accommodations for a student. So I would encourage you to identify a school that your student might be interested in or schools that your student might be interested in, and then talk to them about the accommodations that they would offer. And there was one last question. A parent asked if there were any colleges that offered a lot of support to their living arrangements. I want to stress that regular college is going to be different from, say, a Mason Life program where there would be a lot of supervision. Most colleges do have an RA living there, someone who is available to talk to a student who is having worries and concerns. Um, and also, if your student would do better with it, it might be possible to have an accommodation to have a private room on campus. So I'm wondering if there are any questions in the Q&A.
Well, we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A, Jeanette, but I will take the chance till you go over them, to look at them, to introduce, as I said, we do have today with us Shira Brothers,
Right,
uh, who will be presenting now. So if she can share her screen with us. Thank
absolutely.
you. So we have with us today Shira Brothers, which is an accomplished educator with 26 years of dedicated service in Fairfax County Public Schools, where she has held various roles, including ASL teacher, professional school counselor, a manager for hearing and vision services, and senior manager for career and transition services. She holds a bachelor's degree in deaf education and elementary education from Flagler College and a master's degree in human development with a focus on counseling from the George Washington University. Her areas of expertise include self-determination and championing students to communicate their strengths and needs in a way that helps them to advocate for themselves at school and in the workplace. During her tenure, she had expanded work-based learning opportunities, expanded opportunities for students with disabilities to access career and technical education coursework. As well as advanced academic coursework, she is a strong advocate for inclusive schools education and providing opportunities to all students to advance. Please go ahead, Shira.
Good morning, everyone. And I just wanted to say thank you for the warm welcome. And I wanted to say thank you to Janet for that wonderful presentation. I'm going to try to echo some of the concepts that she presented here today to you all and lift up some of the questions that you had in the chat and that you had asked prior to the webinar. So I wanted to just share to you today. Can you all see my screen okay? Somebody give me a thumbs up.
Yes,
I
we
can.
do.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to share with you all today a little bit about our career and transition services here in Fairfax County, and specifically what kinds of services that we deliver, and in the hopes that you will get a better understanding of how we help our students with disabilities apply for colleges and learn about post-secondary opportunities. Here in Fairfax County, we have employment and transition representatives who are special education teachers specifically trained in career and post-secondary planning. We also have academy resource teachers who work with our students in career and technical education fields to make sure that that content and those opportunities are available and expanded to all populations. We also include our general educators to the fullest extent possible to make sure that our IEP team is well-rounded and represents the needs of our students. Each one of the high schools has at least one employment and transition representative. And if you have a student or students here, I'm hopeful that you already know who those individuals are. But if you do not, there is a simple search on our web where we can help you find who your school's ETR is. Or you are welcome to reach out to me at the end of the presentation and I can give you that information. So what do we do here in Career and Transition Services? We provide students with career assessments, including but not limited to interest inventories, strength finders. We do career scope. We do also have a formal assessment process that students could be referred to. We engage in post-secondary planning and activities that match the students' transition goals in their IEP. And we plan with adult services. As Janet mentioned DARS before, the Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services, our representatives are very active in our school buildings, as is our Community Services Board, who assists our families and students with things such as a Medicaid, the DD waiver, assisting with adult services post-graduation. We want to note that the placement and the services are determined through the IEP process and that we really strive to include the family and the student voice as much as humanly possible. So where are these services delivered? The students in FCPS are educated in a variety of settings, including their base high schools, where they start their transition planning at age 14. We have career centers. We have a secondary transition to employment program. Both of those options are available to students who are 18 to 22, and that is determined through the placement of the IEP process based on the student's strength and needs. We also provide services to private day and special education centers in FCPS, such as the Kilmer Center, Key Center, our Quander Road School, our Cedar Road School, and other students in the county as necessary. So as a family, you might be asking, well, when does the magic with transition planning start? And the answer to that is that students with disabilities here in Virginia who have an IEP, we begin writing their transition plan at age 14 or 8th grade, whichever one comes first. So hopefully those of you who have a student who are age 14 or older, you have seen this. And if you have a student who is younger than that, that is something that you can plan for when your student reaches age 14. So why do we do this work? We know that our students with disabilities are best supported in their natural environments, and we want to make sure that every student will graduate ready to thrive in life after high school with the skills they need to navigate and adapt for a sustainable future. That's part of our strategic plan here in FCPS, and Janet has really spoken to a lot of the specifics about what it means and what's required to thrive in life after high school. And so I just want to echo a few of those concepts to you here today. I was really connected to the thoughts about highlighting the flexibility and the executive functioning skills, the financial management, encouraging your son or daughter to be independent and gain those independent living skills early. Those are all great predictors for future success, and we support that 100%. We also aim to center the student voice as a data point and use evidence to ensure each student is ready to make those decisions about their future as to the fullest extent possible. We have a wide range of post-secondary options that we help you navigate through. One resource I wanted to lift up to you all today is the, since we've been talking so much about accommodations and students with disabilities, is the KW Guide to Colleges. for students with learning differences. This is a really wonderful resource that each of our counseling offices and our employment and transition representatives use kind of as a guidebook to talk about disabilities offices and what schools offer what supports. We always order the new edition every time it comes out. So I'll be happy to send that resource or post it on my Instagram if anybody is interested in kind of learning more about this particular book. But each of the ETRs in each of your schools have one of those. And then I'd just like to give you some more contact information. We do have a website. We post a lot of things on our Instagram. We try to really get our students involved with our Instagram. So you'll see a lot of pictures of them working. You'll see pictures of them learning. You'll see all sorts of post-secondary events that we put on for the students. And then we, for those of you who use Schoology, we do have an access code that you are welcome to use. And then, of course, my contact information is here, phone number and email. So with that, I'd like to lift up a few of the questions from the chat and then also take any other questions that are not answered yet. So let me go ahead and take a look at the chat. I did answer this one in the chat. College Steps is still available currently, and I do believe they'll be presenting at our resource fair, which is coming up on November 16th. 6th, I'm sorry, November 6th. And our flyer is available widely. Instagram is usually the easiest place where parents find it, I find. So College Steps will be presenting at that time, have a table there. And then one of the other questions I wanted to lift up from the chat is, can a student get connected with the ETR and DARS in 10th grade, or do they have to wait till 11th and 12th? The answer is yes, they absolutely can get connected with the ETR and DARS in 10th grade. They can get connected with the ETR in 9th grade. We also have 2 resource middle school ETRs who are really great at helping school teams connect with the high school to ensure that kids have a smooth transition with their coursework and their IEP, transition IEPs in middle school going to 9th grade. So I'm happy to provide that information to you. If you have trouble connecting with your ETR, please reach out to me through email and I will facilitate that process, okay? Another question that was lifted up in the chat is, are there any public art schools that offer character design and digital art for an autistic student? And the answer to that would be, for the older students who are in high school, we have a wide variety of CTE programs, career and technical education, including our academies. And I would encourage you to take a look at Fairfax Academy and their coursework online. They have a number of digital art type of courses and other sorts of computer graphics courses. Some of the base schools, the base high schools also offer those types of courses. So if I can be of further help directing you with that, again, please feel free to email me and I can connect you with some of those things. And then let's take another look at this. Make sure I get all the questions that you lifted up. I think we've touched on a lot of these other ones already that Janet was already able to speak to. Have I left any questions on the table? Please feel free to ask.
Well, we still have a few minutes. If someone would like to ask any questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we will be able to take at least a question before we end up our time today. And also, I have posted in the chat the link for the evaluation. Please take a few moments to fill out the survey or the evaluation to evaluate our session today. And if you have questions or anything that you would like to be discussed in the future, please put that in that evaluation link when you fill out that evaluation. Also, we will be sharing the slides of the presentation with everyone who registered for the session and the recording link next week and the upcoming events for the Career and Transition Services Office. We will be sharing that for everyone to make sure that you have the chance to participate in those events to get to know more information. Well, it seems like we are not going to get any questions today. So thank you so much all for being here today. And thank you a lot, Jeanette and Shira, for the wonderful presentation and the efforts to put up all of that information together and explain everything in details to our families. It was a very well presentation and a lot of valuable information was shared with us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all.
Thank you all. So if it seems like we have last minute questions.
Well, there was a question in the Q&A. A parent wanted to know more about those assistive technology things I
Mhm.
mentioned. I mentioned Grammarly, I mentioned voice-to-text software, and I mentioned a recording device such as the Live Scribe pen for
Mhm.
keeping track of of a lecture. But I would also encourage you to reach out to your assistive technology specialists who might have additional tools that would be helpful. And also, when I mentioned that the memorandum of accommodations can transfer from one school to another, it's not just limited to transferring from community college to a four-year school. It could also apply to moving from one four-year school to another.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Janet. We do have a last question. If
Yeah.
my child does not pass SOL, can she still go to college?
Well, that's the whole issue about what are they called? I'm drawing a complete.
The Splavica, this locally awarded verified credits.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a whole long presentation to
I'd
talk
be
about. Yeah, please go ahead.
I'd be happy to just speak to Fairfax County. I would direct you as a family member to speak to your student's case manager to determine what sorts of credit accommodations may be available to your son or daughter via their IEP. We have something it's a very weird term, but it's called Splavica, which is a special credit that students can earn by they have to go through a process, but your case manager will know more about that and how to guide you to choosing that option if it fits for your son or daughter. And then one last thing, to Janet's point, each of our schools is supported by an assistive technology teacher. So again, I would reach out to your student's case manager to determine who that individual is if you need specific support with AT, anything speech to text, or any other sorts of communication devices. Janet was talking about alarm clocks. I'm a huge alarm clock fan. We had one that vibrated under the bed, at home when my son was young, and it always got him up. So I fully encourage you to reach out to your AT teachers in your buildings.
Well, again, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation and for everyone who attended with us today. And I hope you have a very nice weekend. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.